And now it's time for our speaker, our own Reverend Philip Falcone, who always has a very inspiring and informative message. Reverend Philip Falcone.
Thank you, and God bless. Well, I don't know if this is going to be too inspiring. It's going to definitely be thought-provoking. As you know, we've started going through J.J. Hurtak's The Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch, and I'm going to reread the first 3 keys that he gives. We live in a many and one universe. The second key, the creative mind as the center of this universe is known as Lord, King, and Redeemer. And the third key, the creations which survive are creations which desire that the species gather life and light into the image and similitude of the higher evolution, which is the living universe. And after reading that, I'm going to continue with a little bit about, well, I'll just continue. The scroll starts with an open-ended cosmology rather than a close-ended cosmology. For if it were to say in the first key, the creative mind as the center of this universe is known as Lord, King, and Redeemer, it would put all galaxies into a single universe. And man, by starting out with his own 3-dimensional concept of God, would limit God to that universe. And he would argue with his fellow man as to the meaning of God and the definition of what is God. Is he the God that the ancient Christian theologians are seeing in terms of the city of God? Is he God in terms of what the ancient Judaic theologians are seeing in terms of God beyond the nature? Whoops, I apologize. The ancient Judaic theologians are seeing in terms of the Melech Shamayim, and I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, and I apologize for my ignorance. Or is God beyond the nature of description, whereby Yahweh means that no one should begin to define what is beyond definition? I want to go back to the question that he put forth. Man with his 3-dimensional concept of God, and how he would argue with his fellow man as to the meaning of God and the definition of what is God. And that is where we shall resume with the definition, your definition of what is God. When I brought this up at an Independent Spiritualist Association event, there was, well, needless to say, there was a lot of internal disagreement. And it amounted to someone saying, if you're looking for one word, you're not going to find it. And it's not that we are looking for one word, because there are different ways of defining what God is. There is how we choose to define God, and then there is the experience of God. And I leave you to determine which aspect you choose to voice or you choose to build on. Because, mind you, when he talks about arguing with our fellow man, we only have to look at history and today's headlines to confirm this. But for our discussion here, our fellow man is going to be all of you and myself. So how do you define God? What is God to you? I see Reverend Thomas has unmuted, so we shall let him step out into the unknown and regale us.
Well, let me suggest that our first principle, defining God as infinite intelligence, I feel like is a pretty good start. Intelligence is um, something that is non-physical and but contains all of the wisdom, the programming, the whatever you want to define it as. And of course, infinite is self-defining, that there is no limit or no end to that. And that's a pretty all-encompassing broad definition to begin with. And personally, I've come to see, the old almost cliche, God is love, but we have to redefine love as the energy of the universe, the fundamental energy of the universe that is at the as not only the cause, but the what is required for everything to manifest that we experience in the universe, and that this energy is life trying to happen, and I see that showing up again and again and again in scientific research, where they find life trying to happen in the most unbelievable conditions. Life wants to happen. And in the place where life can flourish and evolve, we are one of the results of that, of getting to the place where we are sentient, that we are self-aware, that we can begin to be the source, observing itself and all that is around it, and the potential of taking an active role in the evolution of life itself.
Okay. So infinite is that I believe infinite is the key point. Am I correct with that? No limit.
Well, both are required. Intelligence is non-local, non-physical, and unless one decides that the blob of gray matter in our head is where intelligence is, where intelligence interacts. By my definition, intelligence is beyond the physical, and is the thing that continues to exist when the physical is no longer functioning. And therein lies where we end up interacting with those that are both in the physical and no longer in the physical, that because the intelligence is continues. It's an energy form is the best way we may be able to describe it from our three-dimensional perspective. But it is something that exists aside from any physical manifestation, and it is eternal.
Okay. Well, we're not going to go into defining intelligence because that is an altogether different topic there. Did you have something, Rachel? I noticed you unmuted.
Well, I guess in short summary, what came to my mind was that most truth seems to embody a paradox. And I think that, for me, God is all that is and is one source. Does that make sense?
Could you elaborate a little more?
Well, I think that we are all kind of a spark of God energy. And, but there is one source, of God from which all things spring.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to add something, Daryl?
I was just trying to gather my thoughts here a little bit, but for me personally, it's more of a what I can perceive with my limited abilities to experience God within. And I sometimes feel like I remember reading something about the television back in the day when we had 4 channels or something like that, and that's all we could receive. And nowadays you can receive 100 and some channels, and it's a question of raising your vibration, your frequency to receive more channels, shall we say, to understand better what God is. But I don't think it can be defined at all. It can just be experienced, and it's just a question of how much can be experienced given where we're at the moment.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I like that.
And I think that having a finite definition is all we can maybe expect isn't we can understand in our limited in our place on our journey. So it's not to say we're wrong, it's just that how we can perceive where we are. So as we continue to evolve and grow and our paths take us in new directions, our perceptions and understandings will grow at the same time. So what I think and what Sharon thinks, for instance, might be different, but it's the same. In our way, I know that, I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. So there's really no wrong. It's just where you're at. That's just kind of the way I see it. It's just where we are, where we are.
Precisely. We're all at different levels.
Kind of like God is an abstract painting that we're all experiencing differently.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Beth, any thoughts?
Actually, my brain's been stuck on number 3, the second part of that third. What are they called? Keys? My brain's been stuck there. Sorry.
Keys.
And I bet you're going to bring it up next after this. But yeah, the God is undescribable. And even experiencing God, that to me is also undescribable because we are limited by our 3 dimensions, our words, even the limited amounts of feelings we've been ascribed in this form. So that's it. Adding more words is just going to make me babble.
Well, here's a thought. What are your thoughts? Well, I shouldn't say here's a thought. Here's a question. What are your thoughts about the many gods approach?
I have always been fascinated ever since I was able to read or got through some schooling by polytheist cultures. So I read every bit of mythology I could, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, or the Greek gods who were usurped by Rome, the pagan deities, the nature deities, Aboriginal deities. So that's always made more sense to me on an instinctual level since I was very small. And even with the experiences I've been having since I've joined this church and have taken these classes, all these spiritual experiences, that I feel are being this interaction with spirit, which are different spirits, Holy Spirit, my guides, other people's spirits, other people's guides. They are all aspects of God, just as like I am in this form. So yes, I am experiencing God, but there's just, I keep thinking it's, God's house is designed like the Vatican. The Pope's in charge, but who does all the work? Your archbishops, your bishops, your monsignors, your priests. That's what I feel like all this is. My interactions with people in different levels with different responsibilities. That's the way this little three-dimensional brain kind of puts it together. I know it's very simplistic. It works for me right now. That's right.
That's the important thing. It works for you.
Anyway, I had this baby, and then this little tiny nun, came in. She had to be 80 years old, and she came into my room and she said, I told her I'm not Catholic, and she said, oh honey, she said, oh dear, we all pray to the same God. This was a nun. I never forgot that, and this is 40 years ago. So that's just so impressed me, because she was a woman very wise beyond her years, and that's why she was like the goodwill ambassador to the mothers. She went to every room and kind of talked to everybody. So I just never forgot that. So I always was impressed to think that just the title, the experience, and of course I also look at it karmically, because every incarnation must experience what it's like to be a Jew, or to be a Muslim, or to be a Hindu. We can't understand it unless we experience it. And so even though it may be the Hindu God, it's still God. So that's kind of where my feeling always lied. I felt like we're on the same page. We're trying to reach the same goal. We're all just on a different path. And that's kind of how I perceive it. Also, it's rather simplistic, but it works for me.
Good. Anybody else have any thoughts on this idea of the many gods concept?
Well, I think even in religions where there are different deities, like Hinduism, they represent different aspects of the divine. Even within Hinduism, a person practicing that religion, I can't think of what you would call just a Hindu. I don't know, for some reason in my brain that doesn't register as being the right term, but anyway, I knew someone from India who practiced Hinduism, and he said, each of the gods just represent a virtue that you want to embody or to bring in more into your life, whether it's prosperity, abundance, compassion, so we will put that God in our God room, they have many houses, if you're fortunate enough to have a house, have a little closet or room devoted to the gods. And it's a God room where you would go and meditate and meditate on that virtue or that quality that you want to bring into yourself or your life. So even in that way, I felt like there wasn't really this separation. There wasn't a many gods necessarily theme with separate power or at play. It seemed like they were all part of the whole, and each represented a different virtue and energy.
I'd be inclined to think that you're absolutely right, and it's really, in my mind, at any rate, it's a way of focusing our attention to what we feel is important to us at that particular moment. Whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism, they have all these entities that people will pay homage to, and it's just a mechanism, if you will, to focus your thinking and your desire for whatever it is. So that's kind of what I've experienced here at any rate. So,
Mm.
And any other thoughts?
So much is the interpretation of that experience with God, and that's affected by so many factors. And I have a short story to share from a cousin. He was maybe when he was about 4 years old, he was out, they lived on a farm and they were out in the field. And he came crying to the house, and he claimed that his older brother had kicked him in the stomach. What actually happened was he touched the electric fence. But that was the only thing within his awareness that he could relate to based on what he felt and experienced. And it's a very simplistic story, but it probably reflects a whole lot of what has happened down through the ages with all of the differences in religious. And of course, the difficulty comes in when that solidifies into the only definition of that experience or the only description of what God is. And then that may be where Reverend Philip started with this. We have the definition of God, and then we have the experience of God. And the definition of God just simply needs to be broad enough to allow for the experience to be defined in the best way possible and not limited by other artificial factors. Really great discussion, Reverend Philip.
Thank you. I'm going to share with you a little known teaching that comes out of the Bible from the Psalms. I believe it was Solomon that wrote them, but I could be wrong with that assumption there. And forgive me because I do not recall exactly which psalm it is, but he writes in there that we are God's because we are the children of God. And then Jesus reiterates this later in one of the Gospels. Is it not written that you are all God's? So when I say many gods, I'm saying that Heather and Daryl and Sandy and Sharon and Reverend Thomas and Rachel and Beth, that you are all God's. And collectively, we are one. So, and that kind of comes back to what we talked about in our last discussion with this, was the many universes and the one, and how I saw each of you as a universe, many universes, and then one, because we are all collectively one. It's interesting how in our discussion, we always came back to a single source. And, one of the things that's being suggested here is there's not only a single source, that single source is collective, but there are also many sources. And I believe the term that Rachel likes to use is co-creator, or maybe that was Reverend Thomas. But the idea of co-creator, okay, that's us creating as one, and then we create our own reality. So that is each of us as a creator, many and the one. And that's going to be an important concept as we work our way through this, or at least portions of this. You may, once we get through this first part, you may want to tell me, let's not do that anymore. Let's do something else. Because it is some very serious ideas that are being proposed. So, does anybody have any comments or questions they would like to voice?
I just wanted to comment that, like I had said earlier, my head is stuck on this concept of that third key about the many universes, but it just explains a lot of some of the visions that I have seen that have been brought to me. The seeing different planets. The most recent one was that planet Woofy showed me in one of our talks, and it's not of this universe. It's not of our solar system. And it just explains a lot about like the travels I've had in dreams or meditations that have just been outside this galaxy, outside what NASA's been able to show us. It just explains so much. It's very exciting. It kind of feel like I've been affirmed. That's it.
Okay,
I'm
well,
done now.
I want to read this little bit here. Well, maybe not a little bit, but I'm going to close with it. And when you see the many as well as the one, you recognize that the most perfect plurality is also the most perfect unity. By going into the splendor of the universes, plural, you recognize a higher plan of creation than can be seen in this universe, in this level of creation. Then you can understand that that one must go beyond all theologies and all cosmologies, which say that this is God here, only in this level of creation. Key part here, beyond all theologies. So what he's saying is our theologies are what have limited the concept of God. But again, it's going to come back to you and your perception as you continue on your path. Your perception will evolve. I'm not going to say change. I'm going to say evolve. And with that, I'm going to say God bless to all of you, and thank you for allowing me to share that with you.